Thank you, Lucy. Can everyone see the title slide on the presentation? Are we good there?
Yeah. Yep.
Voice is coming through clearly. That's great. Okay. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Up webinar series presented by Urban Minds and Bousfields. We are very excited to welcome some students from across the GTA to this session this evening. So feel free to post what high school you're from. You may find some friends from who might be tuning in as well. As I said, my name is Charlie, and I will be one of your three co-hosts this evening, as I'm joined by Celina and Preet. And if you didn't know already, today is in fact World Town Planning Day, and we are very excited to share with you a little bit more about urban planning and how Bousfields operates within that space. So as I said a moment ago, my name's Charlie Smith, and I am a professional planner with Bousfields, and I have worked there for just over 3 years. I first got into planning when I was actually in third year university. So I didn't really understand or get to know urban planning until a bit later in my education. But I took an intro to planning course and something just clicked with me. I was very drawn to the problem solving aspect and just understanding how cities are big, complex puzzles with a lot of competing interests. And with that, I will pass it off to Preet to introduce herself.
So hi everyone, I'm Preet. I recently graduated from the University of Waterloo. I did my 8-month internship with Bousfield and have been working full-time with them since June of this year. So my interest in planning was evoked when my dad would take my brother and I on a car ride and we would go look at these new communities that were built around us. I always wondered like how these communities came to be or where the people behind building them. Another reason is that during my last year of high school, Waterloo grads gave presentation about planning, just as we are doing today for you. With that, I will pass it off to Celina.
Hi everyone, I'm Celina and I'm excited to hang out with you all this evening. Currently, I'm one of the planning interns at Bousfields as I am almost finished completing my master's in planning. I've always had a passion for people, the environment, and community, but I didn't get involved in planning until I was in my third year of my undergraduate degree. There, I had the opportunity to shadow a municipal planner for the day, and I became inspired by the conversations. So hopefully our conversations today will inspire you all to explore the field of planning.
So here's a quick overview of our agenda this evening. We're going to start with a presentation about urban planning and some subcategories that Bousfields has expertise in. We'll follow that by a short question and answer period about the presentation, and then we'll shift into our case study design activity. After that, we'll have some groups present their concept, and we'll finish with a final question and answer period.
Now, to get everyone thinking, we have a question for you. What is urban planning? So go ahead and type a quick one-word answer in the chat. There's no wrong answers, whatever comes to mind. Politics, design, yes. Walkability, that's a good one. So these are all great suggestions, and I'll pass it off to Celina.
So thank you all for your great answers. Wow, so many coming in. So when Charlie, Preet, and I tried to define urban planning for this presentation, some of the key aspects we highlighted of urban planning is sustainability, problem solving, public engagement, transportation infrastructure, and built form. For example, we as planners want to ensure the projects we work on are sustainable for future generations. We seek to find a solution that balances all stakeholders involved. We recognize how important inclusive and diverse forms of public engagement is to the community, and we are conscious of how the function, shape, and the configuration of buildings have in relation to the street network and open spaces.
So we've given you a pretty broad overview of what we think entails urban planning, but as we go through this presentation, we'll want to ask you what you think urban planning is as you learn more. Now I want to speak a little bit about the planning profession, and what I want to emphasize in particular is that it's a profession where there's no single decision maker. The planning field requires a lot of collaboration, engagement with communities, problem solving, all of which informs the public interest. So as we mentioned on the previous slide, there are numerous stakeholders who are involved in the planning process. which can include community groups, land developers, city staff, private consultants, which Bousfields is, and local business improvement associations. There are really endless opportunities and roles that participate in the planning world. Speaking to Bousfields in particular, we primarily specialize in 3 areas: planning, urban design, and community engagement. And throughout this presentation, we'll talk a little bit more about each of these areas and why they are important.
So to get a better understanding of planning, what are documents that influence planning decisions? Again, no wrong answers, quick one-word answers. So go ahead in the chat. Official plans. That's a good one. We're actually going to talk about that later on in our presentation. Zoning bylaws, wow. Planning Act.
Oh, some experts in the field here. Okay.
So moving on. So an important skill for planners is to understand how documents associated with the different levels of governance can impact planning. So in the planning world, specifically in Ontario, there are 3 levels of governance that includes provincial, regional, and municipal. So here you can see a hierarchy breakdown. So starting off at the highest level includes provincial. That includes documents that direct overall planning objectives, including such as provincial policy documents or growth plan for the greater Golden Horseshoe. Compared to the regional level, these documents provide direction for specific planning objectives such as environmental protection. Also at this level, municipalities are differentiated into upper tier and lower tier municipalities. So Region of Peel would be an upper tier municipality compared to City of Mississauga, it would be a lower tier municipality. Last but not least, at the municipality level, the most important document is the official plan that guides the short-term and long-term development within communities. So now Charlie will further discuss an example of an official plan.
Okay, so the hierarchy of planning is really important to understand and how these planning objectives get implemented. And one of the most important documents for any city or town is their official plan. So in this instance, we are looking at map 2 of the City of Toronto official plan, which is referred to as the urban structure map. This is essentially the bones of the city. It consists of different designations, including centers, avenues, the downtown and employment areas, as well as green spaces. When thinking about where we want to direct growth in a city, for the Toronto context, we look to some of these areas. In the red, you'll see what we call centers. For this, think of your Yonge and Eglintons and major intersections such as Yonge and Shepherd. The biggest area where growth is directed is the downtown, which is highlighted in orange. This is your tall buildings, concentration of office buildings and apartments. And then we have a third designation, which is called the avenues. So those are the brown lines that extend across major streets throughout the city. So you can think of Eglinton Avenue with the new LRT being implemented, Bloor Street with the existing subway, and even Kingston Road out to the east. All of these areas and streets are considered avenues, which are planned to accommodate growth. We will continue to talk about the importance of avenues later in the presentation, but next, here's Celina with another official plan map.
So map 18 of the City of Toronto official plan identifies where certain land uses can be located. As you can see on the image, a high concentration of red coloring exists in the downtown core. This is because it's designated mixed-use areas. The orange designation is apartment neighborhoods, and this consists of taller buildings. The yellow area is typically low-rise residential uses, as this designation is referred to as neighborhoods. The blue area is institutional areas, so think like the University of Toronto campus. The brown area is regeneration areas, so the Portlands project. The green is parks and open spaces, and the purple area is employment areas. So now that we have briefly talked about land uses, Preet is going to discuss with you some important aspects of urban design.
As we had mentioned before, the second area that Bousfields specializes in is urban design. That is essentially the interrelationship of buildings, the public realm, and the overall human experience within a space. It also includes different materials, shapes, and forms of a building, and the creation of an enjoyable space. So a prominent example of this would be Birksea Park, as seen in the right-hand corner. And this park is really close by to our office as well. So during the activity, we encourage you to consider how these spaces interact and create a pleasant experience, what makes an enjoyable space. Charlie will now touch upon the specifics of urban design guideline.
So from the broad category of urban design comes another policy document that influences how buildings are shaped and how areas should develop. So these are what we refer to as urban design guidelines. And urban design guidelines can vary across the city and can cater to a specific vision or a desired building type that an area may want to see. In this instance, we're going to focus on the mid-rise performance standards. So these are a set of principles that aim to guide the development of mid-rise buildings along the avenues and other major corridors across the city. You may recall that when we were looking at map 2 of the City of Toronto official plan, avenues are areas where growth is anticipated, with mid-rise buildings as one of the primary building types that are implemented. So as we can see in the diagram in the bottom right corner, there are a number of key objectives that mid-rise buildings aim to achieve when constructed. One of the primary objectives is the creation of a street wall. A street wall will frame a street that it fronts onto and can create a perception of a certain character that is either existing or desired along a street. In this diagram, we can see that there is a 4-story street wall. We have the ground floor followed by 3 additional stories above before the building steps back. And when I say the term step back, this is where the building is shifted away from a main building wall to create the very image of basically a step. Simply put, this step back can reduce the overall appearance of a mid-rise building from the pedestrian perspective when walking along a street at ground level. So for example, if you're walking along a street and there's an 8-story mid-rise building, but they've established a 5-story street wall, those step backs at the upper level will reduce your sight lines to those upper levels. This can make the building appear shorter than it actually is and create an overall more pleasant pedestrian experience. As a rule of thumb, a single story in a new building for a residential floor is typically 3 meters, and a ground floor is typically 4.5 meters for something like a commercial retail space or a lobby. In addition, step backs can also allow for additional sunlight onto sidewalks, which is another key objective. Providing generous public sidewalks, including trees and landscaping, is also a key objective that can be emphasized in urban design guidelines. A final item I'd like to focus on this slide, as well as for the activity, is the notion of transition. So in the top left corner of the diagram, you'll see a notation that states transition to adjacent neighborhood, angular plane, and setbacks. So what is an angular plane? An angular plane is an imaginary line that is drawn from a lower scale area that aims to keep a building from negatively impacting adjacent uses. So this can simply or broadly be referred to as a transition in height. So on this next slide, you'll see here what Bousfields would actually create for a client when evaluating a property for a mid-rise building. So you can see in the top example, option 1, that the property is generally rectangular, it frames the street, and there's a total height of 10 stories with stepping down of height to the south towards a 3-story component. In option 2, you'll notice that additional lands at the corner of Jane Osler and Dufferin have been added to the application. So here we can really see the step backs at the rear of the building, which are being informed directly by that angular plane as the lands transition towards lower scale uses. So when we do our activity, transition will be a large component of how you should consider orienting your buildings and accommodating appropriate building relationships. Next, Celina is going to talk a little more broadly about building typologies.
So now that you all have had an introduction on urban design, I want to talk about some of these images on the slide. So as you can see on the left, you have mid-rise and townhouses, and on the right, you have tall buildings. It's very important that as urban planners and designers, we recognize how these buildings have shadowing impacts on sidewalks and open spaces, as well as how building heights transition to adjacent buildings and building types. It's critical that the redevelopment and development is aware of how built forms relate to the surrounding context. So I'm very hopeful that you all remember this point for the coming activity. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, another area of planning that Bousfields specializes in is community engagement. So community engagement is important because it drives action to implement projects and policies that benefit individual communities. The Planning Act states that it's mandatory for public consultation to occur, which is generally referred to as a community consultation meeting. But most importantly, we need to consult the community to gather input on new development or redevelopment, understand resident concerns, engage with stakeholders, and also educate individuals about the planning process. At Bousfields, we strongly believe that community engagement processes are rooted in collaboration and work to inform one another. We strive to provide our clients with an opportunity for meaningful engagement practices through our team of experts. So some community engagement best practices as planners include speaking in plain language as clearly and concisely as possible, never answering a question outside of your expertise, actively listen while maintaining an approachable demeanor, don't interrupt anyone, take notes, and always be kind and understanding. So now that you have all gained some knowledge in planning, urban design, and community engagement, Charlie is going to discuss the concept of complete communities.
Thanks, Celina. So most, if not all of the concepts that we have discussed so far contribute to a key policy directive that is known as complete communities. So complete communities are places where residents and visitors alike can live, work, shop, play, and have access to daily goods and services. One of the critical elements of complete communities is the facilities and services that residents have access to. And Preet is going to talk about the importance of those facilities.
So community services analysis helps planners understand neighborhoods. As neighborhoods are continuously evolving, we need to understand what services are currently available. That includes looking at school capacities, daycares, recreation centers, or park spaces. Planners need to think critically and understand how developments will impact the community, such as household income or family size. When you're doing the design activity, make sure that you consider what amenities around the area or what the individuals residing in your proposed development will have access to. And Celina will now discuss the specifics of complete communities.
So this is the last slide before getting into our activity. And before we move on to that, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to summarize key aspects to consider for achieving complete communities. This includes having access to everyday amenities, having the ability to use multiple modes of transportation, protecting parks, have a range and mix of housing, and maintaining a community where all the community members feel safe, respected, and comfortable being truly themselves. It's creating an inclusive and diverse, strong sense of belonging. Complete communities is a strong focus of provincial and municipal planning documents, and the creation of complete communities benefits all demographics. So for you all, when we get into the activity, think about what a complete community means to you. But before we begin, does anyone have any questions?
If there's questions about a specific slide, we can also navigate back to that slide if that helps prompt the discussion. But no wrong questions, so feel free. Knocked them dead, guys. We did it. We covered it all. Okay, let's move on. Oh,
there's a question.
One question. What is the largest avenue in Toronto?
The largest avenue in Toronto. Well, let's navigate back, shall we? I think it would probably be maybe Bloor Street or Kingston Road. So Bloor runs from, this is Kipling GO station all the way in the West End, and Bloor Street runs all the way across. Well, it transitions technically into Danforth once we get across the Don Valley, but I would consider that one large avenue. And then you have Kingston Road that goes all the way up through Scarborough as well. King Street is also a pretty big one as well. So yeah, avenues are places where growth is expected. Mid-rise is typically the type of built form you'd see. But within the downtown, as I mentioned, you'd have some taller buildings obviously concentrated in there. And a key aspect of avenues is typically they'll have access to some form of higher order transit, whether it be an LRT or a subway, or even buses that run on more frequent intervals at like a 10-minute interval. So those are some of the kind of key aspects about avenues too. Okay. I was told by my professor in university never to skip slides fast like this. So I'm breaking some rules here. So I apologize. But we're going to get into our interactive case study and design activity. And yeah, go ahead.
They actually have two more questions. One to follow up to the Avenue question. Why is there a gap in the Eglinton Avenue area? And does Toronto have air rights?
Why is there a gap in Eglinton? Is that what the question was? I can't see the questions right now.
Why is there a gap in the Eglinton Avenue area?
Eglinton Avenue. So this is Eglinton right here, and this is Yonge and Eglinton in the red. And it looks like, yeah, so this would be Mount Pleasant. And yeah, that's a really interesting insight. So one thing to note about avenues is that even if it's not identified as an avenue in the official plan, there's certain other policy characteristics that can promote intensification along a corridor like Eglinton. So for example, the Eglinton LRT is a great example of transit-oriented intensification. So where you would have a new Eglinton LRT stop, it would have access to really convenient transit. That's one pretty straightforward argument for building more dense built forms around transit. Gives people multiple options on how to get to work or how to run errands. So not everywhere that doesn't have an avenue isn't going to see any growth. It just means, certain areas that are designated avenues might see more than your average street.
And
Can I chime in as well? So this is Ryan from Urban Minds. Yeah, I would say that part there east of, I guess that would be Yonge. I think that's the Lee side, and that's it's a older, more established neighborhood. And so, which is why, like, I guess during the creation of the official plan, that part wasn't included as an avenue. That's my speculation, but that part of Eglinton, that area is Lee side, which is like an older neighborhood.
Very good point, Ryan. Good observation.
Thanks.
Devish, we're actually going to keep your question for the last portion of the webinar, just so we can go into the interactive activity. So there's enough time for us to enjoy that portion.
Okay, so now we're going to get into our case study and design activity. And just as a disclaimer, this is an entirely hypothetical situation. We are just using our imagination here. There's no proposal currently on this site. So just had to put that out there to preface everything. So here is our case study. A large parcel of land is available for redevelopment, which is owned by the City of Toronto. The property next door, which contains an existing mosque, is interested in an upgrade facility and has approached the city for a joint venture project. The existing context contains a mix of traditional apartment buildings, low-rise dwellings, and commercial retail uses at the intersection to the west. Notably, the subject site is located adjacent to 2 public schools and has access to green space to the south. The site is designated mixed-use areas in the official plan, which accommodates a range of residential, commercial, and institutional uses. So as you can see here, there's the privately owned lands, which contains the mosque here, and the city lands are this other section here, which has a retail plaza. And just for reference, I'll show everyone on Google Maps where this is. So this is at Markham Road and Lawrence Avenue East. So if you want to pull up Google Maps on your own to kind of look around the neighborhood, you're more than welcome to do so. And this gives a little more ability to check out the context. So we can see there's a school right to the south. There's some parkland, existing apartment buildings, another school to the north. And then over at this intersection, you have kind of a power center plaza with a bunch of restaurants and grocery stores, things like that. So what's going to happen now, and I think I'll pass it back to Cynthia, We're going to split folks up into some breakout rooms, and there will be one of myself, Preet, and Celina, as well as Cynthia, Angela, or Lucy in one of those rooms, and we'll just be there to kind of prompt you guys and help you walk through this activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link in the chat, and that will give you access to the Jamboard. So whatever group or breakout room you are in, you can just navigate to that slide in the Jamboard. So I'll pass it back to Cynthia to say any other things before we hop into the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Okay. So why don't we go to breakout room 1, and I'm just going to share my screen here. And let's see what breakout room 1 put in here. Okay. So whose group was this facilitating? Who is this?
This is my group.
Preet, this is Preet's group. Is there anyone from Preet's group who wants to talk a little bit about why you made certain decisions and kind of what's happening here?
Yeah, sure. So basically, our design incorporates a multi-use townhouse area that has like the bottom floor can be for commercial purposes and the top for residential, and then just for some easy access to like green spaces, we put a cart yard and a dog park as beside the townhouse area and also beside the child daycare center. And we also put a TTC station and a public road, which is in blue, and some parking area. At the bottom, there's just some like plazas. So like maybe there's a gym or like a restaurant or I don't know, some place for people to buy things. And then over there's a bike trail just to, in case people don't want to take a bus or use a car, they can also bike to their destination.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Haley, for explaining. Yeah, go ahead.
Adding on to that, they considered making this concept as it is because they realized that there was also a lot of like schools in the close proximity. So they thought that, the demographic within the area was prominently family area. So that's why they proposed maybe a child care center and then a courtyard and park to facilitate that.
Great, all great points. I'm a little suspicious. This has a lot of the same ideas as my group, so we'll flick to the next one. We also had a courtyard in the center. Harrison or Devesh, do either of you want to speak a little bit about our layout here?
Okay, so our inspiration was the Apple Park headquarters. So it's just full high rises, and then there's in the end the core of it is just a courtyard where you can find peace from the city's noise. There's 2 public roads which have trees. There's a library, gym, and there's an artistic TTC station.
Very cool. Harrison, anything you want to add?
No comment. Great ideas.
Yeah, so this was a really interesting one. We wanted to align the public road with the existing crosswalk and street light to the top, and then have another public road on the other side. And yeah, just ensuring easy permeability and pedestrian friendly realm to kind of navigate through the site was really important. Lots of trees obviously was a focus, and then having some commercial uses that are lining Lawrence, so some kind of daily amenities. So that was another thing that came up through our conversation. Okay, let's go to breakout room number 3.
That was very good, everyone. So our group had a similar idea to put the public road in the same spot as group 2. Maybe someone from my group wants to expand on this.
Sure. So it's right now a 3-way intersection, and making it 4-way would be good, as we could have connections both to the mosque on the west and on the right a proposed condo site. And this would allow easier access for the mosque, because right now there's just a bay in the middle of the road, and there are 3 lanes of traffic to get through, and for the condo as well. And the condo could be close to part of the area can be city-owned green space, and the other part can be a privately owned condo. The condo part can be closer to the condo on Scarborough Golf Club Road on the east, and the green space can be closer to the mosque. And on Lawrence, we propose like bus/bike lanes, similar to those on Eglinton east of Burnley. So how those work are that the lanes on the far right of the road are only for buses and bikes, and also for right turning cars, but mainly for buses and bikes. And since Lawrence is a 6-lane road in this area, this wouldn't affect it as much.
Yeah, really good point. Putting in some active transportation infrastructure as well as public transit, definitely a key consideration when designing complete streets. That's another concept we didn't get a chance to dive into. And I like that we have part owned city green space, part owned privately space. It's some really good ideas coming through here. So let's go to the last breakout room.
Yeah, so some things that we had in mind was like we noticed that on the north there was like some green space, and on the south there was also some green space. So something that we wanted to do was create like, I guess, this green belt that would kind of give like pedestrians a way to access from this north to the south, as well as a green space to kind of like link together the mosque and the shopping area, because that was like an issue that we found, which is that like they're kind of separate. So by adding like a green space horizontally as well, and adding some like an area for people to socialize and engage with one another, it would like more so connect them rather than have them separate. And referring to like the commercial zone, on top of it, we essentially add a second layer on top of it with office space, because we felt like that'd be a pretty like fitting combination. And then on top of that, we would also put I guess like 2 blocks of residential on top of that. Yeah.
So Daniel, is this so the red is all commercial and the blue is office and then the yellow is residential?
Oh yeah, that's true. And they're kind of like stacked on top of each other.
Oh, okay. This would be quite the undertaking of a building. This is quite large. Really, really ambitious, and I love shooting for the stars. I know we're a little bit past time, so thank you everyone for your participation in this activity. I do really like, Daniel, the green space connection. I think that's a really kind of key point that everyone emphasized in the breakout room. So glad to know that green space is important to everyone. So yeah, we're just about 10 minutes over where we were supposed to end off, but I hope you all enjoyed the activity. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can see some faces again. But yeah, on behalf of Bousfields, Celina, Preet, and myself, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, the activity. We hope that we sparked some interest in urban planning and urban issues. And stay tuned to Urban Minds. They have a lot of cool activities and stuff to engage with. So maybe I'll just pass it back to Cynthia or Angela, and they'll give like a final word here.
Thank you, Charlie, Celina, and Preet. It was really fun, the interactive activity, and the information you provided during the presentation will definitely, hopefully, spark some initiative in our students. We really appreciate all the work you put into it and hope we can collab again. And yeah, thank you everyone for staying a little later. I know it's 10 minutes past, but it was very enjoyable.